All right, I think we're good to go. I welcome you to the Uganda Diaspora Show here on Civic Space TV. My name is Lynn Komugisha, and we are on your socials everywhere on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Oh, sorry, X. I need to get used to that. X, and of course, LinkedIn, and the only place that we premiere our shows on YouTube. So catch our latest and check out our other shows on our YouTube channel. That is Civic Space TV. You'll find us all caught up. Today we're looking, being a Women's Month, we are definitely talking about International Women's Day and how women have taken up space in the leadership system, in the leadership spaces, and how they're being emancipated, how they're equally standing up to the challenge that is life, that is, the economies of our world. Yesterday, our president, His Excellency Yoweri Museveni, launched launched a number of projects to celebrate and mark International Women's Day. But importantly, the theme this year talks about accelerating growth. But that's not all. We are also looking at a very interesting theme that was targeting women entrepreneurs. So the theme is accelerating gender equality through women economic empowerment. And this is a theme that was, according to the Minister of Gender and Social Development, it was selected to focus on a number of things. And I'll begin with just a little bit intro here on what the Minister of Gender talked about, and then we can delve into the rest of the conversation. She said that women constitute 51% of the Uganda population, and don't think we're not limiting this conversation to just Uganda, because it is an International Women's Day conversation. But purposely for the purposes of just introduction to this conversation, they constitute 51.2% of Uganda population, while 49% is male. Now, the female population by the year 2023 stood at about 24.5 million. I want you to look at something. The national fertility rate is at 5.2 in rural areas. It is higher at 5.6 compared to 4.3 in urban areas. Now, another interesting bit is that the national poverty rate is at 30%. This is lower than the international poverty rate. When we look at the women, poverty predominantly is a female face, especially among households headed by divorced and widowed women, 17%, compared to married female-headed houses, 2%. There's so much. The reason I started with those statistics is so that we know that whereas we are advocating for gender equality, there's still massive gaps that we need to, talk about. Now, coming to you, Grace, if I could begin with you. You are a human rights activist, and there's so much that has been going on in regards to the women. When you look at our theme for this year, do you think it is a right theme? Do you think we have reached a point of talking about women, being empowered economically? I don't know where we stand, and does it really resonate at all with what's on ground?
Thank you so much for that. I don't see. Let me start with a disclaimer. I don't see themes or the need for the UN to prioritize when we are celebrating International Women's Month as prioritizing over, or at expense of all the other dimensions of how women need to be empowered. That said, we can all agree that the issue of finance is very, very important. We can't really do much without, women's agency being recognized, whether it's when we're talking about like women in agriculture, where Uganda is, our biggest sector is agriculture sector. We are leading. There's data within Sub-Saharan Africa that shows that over 60% of women are engaging in agriculture production. But then it's a question of, if we are to elevate poverty on the continent, then who needs to have more investment? I think it's finance. But then when we also look at our realities, on the ground, you'll find, yes, the women are engaging in small scale. They need a bit of some money, perhaps from financial institutions to be able to boost up, their enterprises. But guess what? At home, they're not part of land titles. At home, they do not have, the respect of whether they're partners or their family members or things like that. And for the bank, without collateral means they can't give you money. It's simple as that. So I think there's a question of, wait, how do you still address this historic injustice, when it comes to financial institutional, status and how they relate with us. Another also dimension is the question of, the world where we live, the importance of, whether it's investment in education or health. You need finance. And even when we talk about women and the political participation or in leadership, we're looking at how they can also be able to be part of policy to be able to deal with all these issues holistically. And to do that, they still need finance. They have to understand why the financial aspects of things are also very important. So that to say, oh yes, I think it's timely. We need it more than now. Yes, data also shows that we are improving, or at least on women's access to education or young women access to education, still with so many social norms challenges, but at least some kind of access without quality is still there, right? But within that, financial stability of all of us as women, our mothers in the rural areas is very, very important to alleviate poverty at the household. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Grace, for that. And you mentioned something that, that resonates with what the president talked about yesterday. He said that women are the household. He said women should tap into the money economy. And when he says money economy, he means that they should become more involved in making money, being able to sustain themselves. And it has been one of those things he talks about so passionately. And we know that poverty is deeper on the grassroots and it affects women more than it does men. If I can come to you, Dr. Catherine, today women leaders in all realms are struggling to expand the space of women in an increasingly competitive world. And, if we remember the suffragettes, the likes of Emmeline Parkhurst and Evelyn Hilda Bucket, all those ladies were really strong. And when we look back at the struggle to where we have reached, where we are at now, still, in as much as there's great work in place, we still have a long way to go. Dr. Catherine?
Yes, absolutely, Lynn. I think what we need to put on the table first is that women have been making a very significant contribution, but the positioning of that contribution is what we have not recognized, because there have been pillars of homes, and that is a recognized principle. But then how do we then add value to that? How do we bring that into the market and into the means which we recognize as valuable at this stage? And also, it has always been said that if a country or a home is governed by a woman, then there is holistic consideration of all the aspects. At least I have had that in Germany before. The challenge we have in our society is that this discourse is very clear in elite spaces. And it's moving alongside education, formal education. But then women are again confronted with the reality in our customs, in our norms, in our cultures. So there is a dichotomy. There's kind of a distinction of para-existence of those particular theories, and they are not meeting at all. So there is a bit of a conflict in how we live and our practices, and then what we believe in or what we think should actually be the future. And that affects how we give women an opportunity to make the table in policy making. You have seen a lot of mockery, women being bullied around the world when they engage in politics, being policed morally, at the level at which men are not. They're kind of put on a pedestal to be exceptional human beings, super natural human beings, in order to take ordinary spaces for roles they have actually been doing but have not been recognized in that way, Lynn. Thank you.
Absolutely. You put it very rightly. The disconnect between the elite woman and, of course, the rural woman, or the one that is struggling day in and out. And the way we are expected, having this conversation, I'm sure certain other people are looking at it and saying, look at these women. What do they even know how to cook? Do they have time for their families? That stereotype, that is the sort of equality we're trying to fight for, and the gap we're trying to bridge. Unfortunately, we still have a long way. Clearly, we do, because the divide and the disconnect is still very, very huge. Talking about the divide, there was a conversation on one of our TV stations here, and Miriam shared something very important. When you shared this, I was really taken aback. One of the TV presenters was saying that women should stay in the kitchen, leave the offices. You cannot afford to, sit in the offices, in these big offices. And you're thinking, if we have such people, where we have young girls looking up to these TV personalities who reason like that, we still have a long, long way to go. Dr. Okot, I come to you, and you have had we've had conversations around this. You deal with communities yourself. When women are said to be, when the government says we're trying to empower women, and this is not just women. If you look at the International Women's Day theme, let me see if I can, the international theme was also equally resonating with ours here in Uganda. I will get it a little bit later. But they both talk to they're speaking to the same thing, ending the remaining vestiges of inequality and disempowerment suffered by women. So when we look at the challenges that Dr. Catherine has hinted on, and of course, Grace, where do you think we need to focus on?
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank my previous presenters. I would like to say that this year's UN theme is very insightful. They're talking about invest in women, accelerate progress. And I think this captures, for me, everything. When you invest, in a woman, you are actually, having hope, because most times you find that the women out there who are in leadership, who are in responsible positions, they always actually, perform. They perform. Next door in Kenya, if you look at the governors, if you look at all the governors, in Kenya, you find that most of the performing, counties are actually women governors. The ladies are always very caring, and they show empathy, unlike some of us, the guys. We kind of get a little bit distracted. But I must say right now, the world is facing many crises, ranging from the geopolitical conflicts to increasing poverty levels and escalating impacts of climate change are there. And these challenges can only be addressed if the solutions to involve and empower, women. They will be very instrumental in even addressing like climate change, the poverty, the political crisis. I think, mothers, the sisters, our daughters out there have that kind of empathy and sympathy. Unlike some of the guys who are, we, the men, sometimes we are very power hungry. And I heard my colleagues, I think Catherine and Grace, were saying sometimes that the world out there, they place the radar for women very high, in terms of judgment. When men do certain things, it's okay. And indeed, when the ladies, do, becomes a big issue. That is there. Look here, don't go far. Even right now in Uganda, you find that there are lots of commentators who are pointing fingers at the Speaker of Parliament for many reasons. I'm not here to defend her. She might have her own issues, but how many men are there also who are worse than her? So you find that the women in leadership are always more vulnerable. They are placed under very kind of high parameters. So I find that there's inequality. But to overcome all this, investing in women will improve all this. Like example, if you accelerate economic empowerment, that would also kind of, propel the level of participation in leadership, in community involvement. If you invest in women, you're going to accelerate progress in our societies. If you invest in women, you're going to actually create more economic justice for the people. So I think this is my start for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Okot. Miriam, are you with us?
Hi, Lynn. Dr. Ochen, I really thanks for sharing the Kenya case study on how women governors are performing better than their male counterparts. In light of this, of the Parliament exhibition in Uganda, actually yesterday I was contemplating on what is the case for Uganda. I've not yet checked any data or information that would say that whether women leaders are either more corrupt or less corrupt, more accountable than their male counterparts. But understanding the levels of corruption that we face and the abuse of power, I've wondered, are these quota systems really working for us? I don't have the right answers. I also am aware that within the NRM government at some point, I think Museveni did say it did not really care about corruption because it was also part of distribution of resources, which is like, okay, fine. We're we're still distributing the money, I think, within the country, but then what is the negative impact that results to the state infrastructure that we have in the country, all across broad, from road to healthcare to water. What would you speak to that? And of course, I'm not claiming Lynn's role here, but I'm curious what you guys think on that, because I don't yet have answers on that.
Yeah. Thank you. Lynn is back.
Oh yes, apologies about that. I think my network best. But we can proceed. I will catch up. I don't know what Grace was reacting to, or if it was a. Please proceed.
Let me Grace, let me comment briefly. I think you've raised very pertinent concerns. I must say that I also don't have empirical data at hand in regards to some of the happenings like in our Ugandan parliament. But I must say from the optical view of things, I think at the moment there are things that are not rolling out that well. And I think to some degree, there's some kind of mismanagement of public funds to some degree, and there is kind of a cocoon of legislators who are part of this kind of game where they are used as pawns, or even some of the parliamentary staff are used as pawns to, I would say to divert resources. But I don't have the actual kind of data that is from the social media kind of piece. But I would say that I think in general, the government of Uganda and the civil society, we have failed to tackle corruption. I think corruption is now ingrained in the body, system of Uganda, because everywhere you go, pretty much you must kind of engage in some sort of corrupt tendencies or ways to access even services everywhere. Sometimes even even schools, you gotta even pay maybe bribes what to send your kids to school and to get good schools. Even to access sometimes even healthcare, proper healthcare. You must know somebody within the system sometimes. Even the healthcare workers sometimes go and actually grab, I would say, the drugs, the medicine from the public hospitals and take to the private clinics. All these forms of corruption. So almost everybody in Uganda is almost corrupt. And there's nobody there who can fight no corruption. The parliament cannot provide any checks and balances. They're entangled in this quagmire. When you talk to the IGG, should be independent, but it's also the IGG kind of also gets funding from the parliament. So the parliament is very powerful. At the same time, it has failed to provide primary checks and balances. So that's my take for now about the corruption. And I think I don't have any authority on the information or the data, but this is from the optical aspects of things.
Thank you, Okot. I like that. Yeah, sure. I like that we shifted into the direction because definitely women are at the fore. If you remember, sometime last year, on the other year, we had the Iron Sheet saga. And when you talk about corruption, we saw that women were at the center of it. Dr. Catherine, please proceed.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wish to appreciate Dr. Cheng for his humility in acknowledging that women actually do very well when they are called upon to form the table. But we actually need to think very critically about how this narrative is serving us. I think to make advances, we need to actually think about more of complementarity, because the narrative of substitution of men with women is causing a conflict. It's causing reactions from men, and it's what really makes society think, okay, if you're now bringing in women as better than men, let's see how better they are. And that's how the pedestal kind of reality also comes in. So there is that issue of complementarity. Then there is an issue of, do we seek gender equity or equality? What's the benefit of equity in all things? That caters for the differentiation, and the uniqueness of a woman. That means we are expecting a different way of doing things. We are moving away from expecting a male firm voice as the voice of power to the gentle, soft voice of a woman being authoritative enough. And that comes within the branding itself on how we are selling this. And if you're saying, if the UN is saying invest in the women, that's a directive to somebody. And it's basically telling states do invest in women. What is the gender identity of the state? In many cases, when the core or the top management of any state seats. And this is even some most developed states, except Sweden, if I may say. Sweden is in the Scandinavia. You see men, the identity is men. So you're telling men, please invest in women. And you're creating sort of like, men, please save women. Do women need to be saved? Where are women? Is the savior? Are they waiting for the savior to give them power? How do we really get women to take power? How do we get women to take positions without them having to ask for men to actually validate their presence? How do we encourage our young women who are actually getting educated now that they don't need, or their transition to womanhood is not just getting attached to a man in marriage, but they just need to take positions? Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Catherine. You remind me of something that I encountered earlier today. As I was preparing for the show, it's a very interesting. I was reading something on X, and some gentleman says that the other day he had a lady say that she got a promotion at work, and she's supposed to sort of represent the country at the AU, and they're paying her, I think, about between 1,000 and 1,800 euros. And so she goes back home and tells the husband about the entire thing, and she's like, "My husband, can I? Do you think this is something good for me to do? Can I take it on?" And so the man is like, "Well, these women exist in our society and they're flourishing because they go back home and listen to their husbands on how to carry out their careers." My question here is, though, and Miriam, as I come to you, really, where we are at in society, do we need to go back to our husbands to tell them this is a huge career move for me? Should consider it? I think, anyway, I want to pick your mind on it. It really bothered me a lot, but I would like to pick your mind. But also, Miriam, I would like also for you to speak to the fact that Uganda's legal framework apparently is really robust in promoting gender equality. There's programs that the government has invested in that empower women. And so there is that, but then there's still that huge disconnect that we spoke about earlier on. When we get here and we start looking at our legal frameworks that are really good and very fantastic, but then in implementation, in actuality, seems like a lot is lacking.
Uganda generally, if you compare with maybe other African countries, they've tried on paper to try to empower the women. Like Dr. Catherine Namakula said, if it's like, is it the equity we are looking for or the equality? So if it's just about the numbers, yes, the numbers are there and they are improving. The laws are there somehow, somewhere they are coming up. But we still have a challenge. Like if you say, we have people who are in power, are they really like, do they have the power, the real power, or they just the figureheads? Like, for instance, today, if you really go out and look at the political landscape, the VP is a woman, the Prime Minister is a woman, the Speaker is a woman. You feel like, the women are in things, but do they have the real power? Or they are just figureheads, just in the seat to really be symbolic or to represent one constituency over the other for the political gains of NRM party or something else. So we still lack the content, the quality of that emancipation. The women are empowered. Yes, we see the numbers, the high numbers, women going in universities, they are there. The numbers are everywhere, on all level. If you just look at the results that have been released, you see the women are there and they're performing well. So maybe the girl child is in school, and but is it enough? For instance, when you look, Dr. Catherine earlier talked about the the basics, access to education. I think even Grace alluded to that. The real empowering variants, the access to education, access to health, the land, the economic production. Do women have the real power? And what you said, that we have to go back to the husbands to ask for permission, that shows that the women are still like subordinate to that man. It could be your brother, your father, the husband, or but the male figure. And unfortunately, that patriarchy goes even in the politics. Even the women we see are subordinate to those male figures that appear in power. Uganda is still ruled by one autocratic leader and the military, which is highly dominated by the male power. So the patriarchy is still so much in charge. But I don't want to dismiss like the steps we have taken so far. So if you go back to analyze like where we are coming from and where we are going, yes, we have really moved somewhere. And I think now a girl child who is being born today has opportunities. In most cases, the girl has an opportunity to rise up to become whatever she wants to become if she can access the basics, education, the health, which are still lacking. And I was impressed somehow by the president's speech today. Was it yesterday? Yes, in Katakwi. And he also talked about the basics. Like if you have money, you don't even need the emancipation campaign, the empowerment. And a girl child who is born in a well-to-do family will grow up empowered and will be respected. But those are the exceptions. If you are talking about inclusion, which is the international theme of the Women's Day, everybody should have an opportunity. Every girl child, whether you are born by a single mother, whether you are born by the lowest income community, you should have the power to rise up and achieve anything you aspire to achieve. So you should have all that ability and the access, and that's what would really be the real empowerment. But we still don't see that, and there is still a lot to do as far as the emancipation, the empowering the women, including the women in decision making and leadership is concerned. Today, even if you look at the Ugandan landscape, and so far we all know that women have been achieving. If you look at the numbers, it's quite intriguing. Look at the number of the graduates, the female graduates, and then look at the economic landscape and look who are the women CEOs, who are the women in leadership, who are the women leading the parastatals and organizations. They are just very few and way far apart. And then you wonder if these women had capacity, they have the quality and the education and the skills to really aspire to take up those positions. Why are they not really getting up there? And that's where we still have a lot of work to do, all of us.
That's very right. We all have a role to play there. Dr. Catherine in the chat room says, when I think she was referring to when you're talking about the vice president being a woman, the speaker being a woman. In fact, the prime minister is a woman. Even the deputies and the prime minister are all women. Generally, deputizing syndrome, according to Dr. Catherine. Thank you so much for that. And there's still a lot to do. There's still a lot to learn and also do in regard to women empowerment. If I could quote Her Excellency, the retired Major Jessica Leopold, she said that women leaders who were there in the 1960s can tell you things were different and they made their contribution, though we still have challenges. But the truth is things are changing. And goes on to say that Uganda ranks among well-performing countries in terms of gender parity in top leadership positions, including the vice president, prime minister, speaker of parliament, etc. Nearly 50% of women in the cabinet and representation of women in parliament is above the global average. to the Global Gender Gap Report, according to Global Gender Gap Report. That was the Vice President speaking yesterday at the celebrations to mark International Women's Day. Now, the why I brought this up was to add on to what Miriam was talking about. But when I come back to you, ladies, I don't know if you have any reactions to what has been said so far. Please feel free to interject and to add to what has been spoken about before we can get into the other conversations still related on International Women's Day. There are very many questions that come to the fore when we talk women empowerment, economic empowerment, and we realize that we still have a long way. I want us to come back to a very important conversation, something Dr. Catherine hinted on earlier, about bridging the gap between the elite women and the ones that are on the grassroots, the ones that the president keeps saying should be in the money economy, should be empowered. Because when you say that the conversation is clear among the elite, and Miriam, you hinted on it and said that from a well-to-do family, the girl child comes up, grows up empowered, which is different from the woman, from the girl that is actually in the Kentucky district, for example. How do we bridge that gap? And I'll begin with you, Grace.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I've had technical issues. I'm not sure if you're hearing me. Can you hear me? Okay, great.
It's good.
Thank you. I think I want to build on perhaps countering what Dr. Catherine said, the deputizing syndrome. I personally think it's a competence issue. And while we register having, women leaders in all these high-level political positions, we want to also question what is their competence within this allocated seat. So which brings us, which would bring me to what is the political will in actually seeing gender equality be realized? Because why would someone who really is good willing to achieving this hire incompetent women to lead institutions and then tick off the box that now women are in high-level political leadership? Whether this is intended or an action that was not well thought out, this is what we see. But speak to how we bridge the gap between the rural and this Lynn, whom you've called elite woman. In Uganda, for example, within the agricultural sector, I see a bridge already at play, because we do not have such a classism divide. When institutions are not working, everybody is struggling. I do not see, when I see my village in Bushenyi, I am actually wondering, where are the elite? I know the political elite, where they are, but whether you have access to education, where are the jobs, where are the opportunity to be able to actually use your skill? We are in the village struggling. So while perhaps in other environments they might have such a very clear-cut divide, I say we don't necessarily have it. And that's why, whether it's women who are employed under public service or private sector, we all have a small shamba, where we are trying to economically empower ourselves through farming, to make sure that, we lessen the burden of over-relying on our surrendered positions, and thus also now engaging in, in informal sector of agriculture. And so, but that said, we also have the women that did not have the opportunity to perhaps to study, that dropped out of school from primary school or so, depending on the region, like Isoro. And when I'm home, I can see the immense burden that they have, from having to walk long distances to fetch water on those hills, where a small step you actually meet your death, to having to care for their families, put food on the table. At the same time, we also have an alcohol addiction problem in the country that we've not really openly talked about, on how that impacts the women at the household in the rural or even in the urban areas, and how that disenfranchises the small income that a family has because money is being drunk somewhere. So I don't necessarily have a clear-cut how, but other than the leadership, political will to actually realize gender equality. I don't see it happening there. Even when President Museveni, I think on last year's International Women's Day, he did launch a program called GROW that was supposed to be empowering women. I'm not sure about how it has progressed, or whether the financing from the World Bank came through eventually. But it will still come back to, how are they going to manage the money? If they fail to manage the money to build the roads, or if they are if there's mismanaging money for electricity, for energy sector, why won't they mismanage the money for the women? And why wouldn't that money be used within the NRM party to rally more women buy-in, and leave us in the state of wherever we are, as opposed to actually giving it fair? And I feel like the political question deals with the virus under which all these issues can be managed, plan better, and use the available resources that are in country to actually deal with the question. Because everyday Ugandan has the goodwill. There's no one I have ever met that says that women should not be empowered. Our cultures already speak to that. It's already ingrained to that. But it's a question of how is the state being managed for it to be able to do just that, what we want. Thank you, Lynn.
Right. Thank you so much, Grace, for that. Catherine, what say you?
Are we yet at the concluding remarks? Oh, you're still having our...
No, we still have a long way to go. We have an hour, folks.
Oh, absolutely. This is going to be a very interesting discussion. And I think, Lynn, I wish to take us back to that conversation of not substituting hierarchies with other hierarchies. Yeah. If we are saying that women should be at the same level with men, we should see them alongside men, and not try to put them ahead of them. In some societies, what they're struggling with is actually reverse gender equality. Certain societies, they're failing to have actually now men suit their very advanced women and strong women. And that causes another social struggle. And also we need to be cautious about not thinking that we can actually legislate social practice. So how do we then drive change within our customs and cultures? Unless we touch the core of customs and cultures, where we are seeing kings struggling to actually get boy children to actually succeed them as heirs to the throne, or else there will be nothing. They struggle for that, yet they have several girls with them. So is that a lost opportunity to actually say girls are here to actually also do it the same as men? So that's also another one. And also the inclusivity of the movement. If we are advocating for emancipation of women, then we need to have the men believe in this. And how then do we sell this? What's the value proposition? And it exists. It exists. The burden, a home that has both men and women bringing in income, doing very well, is many steps ahead in many respects. So how do we sell this? How do we brand it? Not just like something that women benefit from, but something that benefits the entire humanity. We need to go out to the men. We don't only need Dr. Ochen, I really appreciate you, but we need to have several others and have this kind of panel also balanced and leadership going out there and telling the men, look, we need to have the women alongside us in order to actually develop our society better. Thank you, Lynn.
Absolutely. And yes, Dr. Chen, we really applaud you for that. Men play an integral role, an integral part, but we have seen that where in a homestead where a woman is doing more than the man, two things happen. One, the man is going to sit back and relax and enjoy the woman's sweat. Two, they're going to fight day in and night. We're going to see gender-based violence. And that is where I think our biggest challenge is. I come to you, Dr. Chen, and we're still trying to understand how do we bridge that gap between the rural woman who is trying her best and probably looking up to the man and hoping things are going to change, and that woman who has sort of seen the light, and well, some of them see the light and they don't want to share the light. So how do we deal with that?
Thank you very much for all your contributions and perspectives on this. And I must say that I do concur with all your perspectives. And I think to bridge, the gap between the elite women and the countryside women, I think is all about identity and ethnocultural, aspects. There are other things in the cultural lenses, might look quite challenging. Like, for example, Catherine was saying that, you see kings are struggling, to have male sons so that they can inherit maybe the thrones, while there are so many, ladies out there. Is that not, a missed opportunity for the ladies? Yes, it is. And again, that means that we need to bridge that ethno-cultural kind of, gap, which is not very easy. But I think also the women play their roles, in the kingdom too. They might not be the king or the chief, but they also play very key roles within the council. Sometimes they are chief advisors, and I think even sometimes the chiefs and the kings don't do their own things without consulting the aunts, the sisters, the princes, the queens. So I think, that's the own, again, cultural dilemma where we face. How do we alter that cultural kind of setup? And I think it might not be done overnight, but it's possible with time. And then secondly, I want to say that to minimize and reduce the gap, for inequality, we need to tackle the underlying drivers of gender equalities, the systemic barriers and their effects, and their effects on women's political empowerment at national, regional, and global levels. We learn more how to approach and how do we promote the transformation shifts in all that, because I was reading in one of the papers from one author, I think from Maryland, was saying that, for example,